Hello everyone, it's Magnus here. Do you know what the most common question I get is? It's this one. How do we practice to play fast? It's something that all mandolin players at all levels are struggling with, so I think it's a very good question to ask yourself. And in today's episode, we're going to discuss this and hopefully leave you with a few tips and tricks that you can take away from this.
Hey there, music makers. I'm Hayes Griffin.
I'm Magnus Sedlund.
And welcome to Mandolin Secrets Live, a show where we take a deeper look at what's happening in the world of mandolin secrets. Each episode, we're going to tackle our questions of the week, unpack the latest mandolin secrets lessons, and answer your questions about mandolin, guitar, and all things music. In this week's episode, we're going to be discussing if you could take a lesson with any player out there, who would it be and why? And do you use a metronome and or backing tracks to practice? If so, what are some of your favorites? Also, we're going to be taking a look at Magnus's new tune, which you just heard there, that rippin' tune called COVID Fever. And we're also going to be talking about our upcoming Mandolin Bootcamp. But before we get into any of that business, be sure to head to mandolinsecrets.com/live to sign up for reminders about our upcoming live streams. And if you can't tune in live, never fear. Just search Mandolin Secrets Live on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to get updates when we release a new episode.
All right, and I want to start in this end because, the most common question I get from mandolin players all over the world is, how do we practice to play fast? How can we play with more fluency, just like the heroes are doing it? And I think, honestly, it's like something that mandolin players at all levels are struggling with a little bit. So it's a very good question to ask oneself, and I've asked myself many times. And I have a few things that I try to remind myself of, and this is also one thing. We're very soon hosting the Mandolin Bootcamp. It's like a virtual, 5-day virtual event where we're going to help people to build control, precision, and speed. Because really, the quick answer to this is speed comes from control and precision, accuracy. It's not coming from force. Because, you have a very good way of saying this, Hayes. If you do your very best and tighten every muscle in your body to go for that energy with that force, what do we get there out of that?
Tension, man.
Tension. Yeah.
You get your tension, and we know at this point, tension is our worst enemy, right?
Tension is our worst enemy, especially when it comes to playing fast. And so that's what we want to avoid. And to get around that, we gotta learn to play with the relaxation and control, basically. And also the way that I think of this there, because looking at all these heroes, Chris Steele, Sierra Hull, Ronnie McCoury, but this really fast player, Adam Steffi, they also have their different approaches to this. So there's not one solution that fits all. And I think everyone has to investigate this a little bit to really get into it. So anyone interested in the Mandolin Bootcamp, you can actually learn more about it and get signed up at our website. It's mandolinsecrets.com/bootcamp.
Yeah.
And this will probably also tie in a little bit to when I'm presenting my new tune here, the COVID Fever. But you heard me say this also before, Hayes, that I compared a little bit to walking and running, because people told me at an early stage that you have to play fast, you got to practice very slow. And honestly, it didn't really work for me, and I don't think it ever worked for anyone really, because it's, I mean, I think that the one that told me this probably did it with the best intention, and what that person meant was like, don't only try to play fast. You also but I was they were saying it in a different way, and I was hearing it very differently. Because let's think about it. People that are playing the fast, of course they also practice to do it in the fast tempo sort of. And I have some tips and tricks and techniques for this. I can't share everyone here, but my point here was it's a little bit like walking and running. You don't get better at running by walking faster and faster. And I think it's a little bit the same, where if you only like are playing it at a slow, comfortable tempo, and you're trying to increase it from there, it's going to be a very slow and tiring process. I think we also gotta like throw ourselves out there and be in the high tempos, like doing our very best to keep up there, but just staying with the flow sort of. And because it's really about like training the musical mind to be in this, and of course the synchronization and all this. But it's I think everyone can see the point there.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that, like walking versus running analogy that you have there. Because even if you were to talk to like a someone in like sports medicine or anything like that, like it's two completely different sets of muscles that perform each action. You know what I mean? For like walking, your body is using a different, it may seem like, you're moving your legs and doing this stuff, but there are different back muscles engaged, and your stride length changes and all this kind of stuff. So to draw that back to what you're saying about music, like playing slow uses a different set of muscles in your right hand than playing fast has to, and like you said, being able to like train your mind to like think at that speed and go with the flow it's totally different, right?
It's exactly. And then I think it relates to this thing that you often point out, that if you can sing it, you can play it, and that is like practicing our musical mind to this fast melodies. We don't do that by playing slow, sort of.
Exactly.
So we gotta, it's, but the main point is here, if we're like throwing ourselves out there to play fast, we can't expect us to play perfectly. We can play perfectly in the slow tempos, but we want to approach this speed picking from two ends, sort of. That's my philosophy around it, and that's also what the bootcamp is hopefully gonna give every participant. And it's already helped hundreds of people, so I think it's I'm really looking forward to it, actually.
Me too. This is one of my favorite times of year.
Yeah, it's but it's also it's like there's a certain kind of when people are into it and it's happening like day after day after day, there's this like a forward momentum thing going for the whole group, sort of. And that is the kind of environment that we want to create. Absolutely.
It's like they bring their best intentions with them, and that somehow like feeds everyone else's like what do I want to say, like positive progress and all that kind of stuff, having all those folks in the same place. It's fun.
Yeah. And also in the bootcamp, we're gonna give a lot of good ideas of how to use a metronome, and also why to use a metronome. And I think that ties into the question you had for the community about backing track and metronome. Would you please repeat the question once more?
Yeah, so one of the questions we tossed out a few weeks ago in the community was, do you use a metronome and or backing tracks to practice? And if so, what are some of your favorite backing track or metronome apps? out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a lot of different answers on this one. I know that you and I have talked about this extensively just between you and me, and it was cool to see some other folks using the same resources. Shout out to the Tempo app, the metronome app. That's the one that Magnus and I use, but there's lots of other great ones out there. By the way, we have no financial interest in any of the things that we're about to say to you here. This is all just like community responses.
Yeah.
But some other stuff, people were finding a lot of great things on YouTube backing tracks, like bluegrass backing tracks, and then the Strum Machine, obviously, which is kind of grown to be like one of the more popular and best kind of put together bluegrass and old time kind of backing track apps.
Brilliant app.
Yeah, I got to say that, Luke is doing a great job over there. We just had a conversation with him a few weeks ago, but this is if you play bluegrass and old time music and you haven't checked out the Strum Machine app, definitely do yourself a favor and check that out. Just lots of good options to help your practice session. But that's definitely, between YouTube channels, iReal Pro and Strum Machine, and then everyone's individual like metronome apps. That was kind of the lay of the land as far as what people were putting out in the community.
And I know you, Hayes, you're really good at making backing tracks.
Yeah.
Was there anyone else like doing their own backing tracks?
Yeah, that's so it's funny enough, when I was scrolling down and looking at some of the answers here, I did just land on Barry Glenn in our community, the Mandolin Secrets Facebook group, said that he uses GarageBand and a virtual drummer. So I think, it's a great idea. I think once you're to the point where you can play solid enough rhythm for yourself, like mandolin or guitar, it's really beneficial to make your own backing tracks.
It is.
Because you have to focus on your own sense of time and getting a good take of just the rhythm out, right? So you can, because if you play bad rhythm and you record that and you try to play with it, then your melody playing isn't going to be so good. But I think it's a great challenge for anyone out there. Even if you don't have a Mac and access to GarageBand, there are lots of free apps on PCs that you can record with as well. Audacity is kind of like the biggest free recording program out there, but BandLab is another one. It's all online. So lots of great resources if you want to try that. I think anyone who considers themselves like an intermediate level player would get a lot out of making your own backing tracks and practicing with them.
Yeah, one thing, I haven't done this in a while because of my time limit for my practice sessions, but for quite a long time, especially when I was getting into more swing and jazz tunes, I used a loop machine, loop pedal, looper, and I tried to. So instead of like playing along with iReal Pro, I try to play the A part, put down the rhythm myself, and then play it over that. And it was a way for me to challenge myself to not only focus on the lead and playing the head and the improvisation, but also like establish a good rhythm foundation in my playing. Yeah, it's also something I find useful.
Man, and I think the skill that you're talking about there is one of the. Oftentimes, it's so easy for us to focus on lead playing exclusively because that's the like flashy, hard kind of thing to do, right? But focusing on your rhythm playing, I always say this to all of my students, if you're in a band or in a jam session, what are you doing 90% of the time? Are you playing solos 90% of the time, or are you playing rhythm for other people playing solos 90% of the time? So, with that, I think we could all do a lot better to practice more rhythm and focus on those things like you're describing.
Yeah. Yes, and it's to be very honest, it's one of the most like it happened to me quite many times. You met players that you think are you really admire because of their soloing skills, and you're about to sit and jam with them, and then their rhythm playing is like, there's a lot to wish from that, sort of. They don't support you. I mean, that is, it's really like an jam situation killer for me, you know.
Yeah.
When you feel that there's no there's no like good rhythm behind
the bottom
you.
drops out, you know.
Bottom drops out. Yeah. But it's not too rare. I mean, there is. I've experienced this quite many times, and so I think that ties into what you just said there also, because the flashy thing is the soloing, and they're where you grab people's attention. But if you're only doing that, in my eyes, you won't fit in my band.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely right. Yeah, I think there's something to be said for that, man. It's unfortunately, I'm thinking in the back of my mind, like, I was definitely that guy at the jam before. I think we've all been there, right? You know, where like I go in and I'm like, I know 20 fiddle tunes and I can kill it. You know what I mean? And then I can't even play like a basic bass drum to keep the people, you know, going. But back in my teenage years or whatever.
To be honest, I think I've always more considered myself a company player and backup player, so I have more like a solid ground in that area.
Yeah,
and I never attracted any attention from my licks and leads. So that's another pitfall to fall into. But I have to work on it, you know. Maybe we can go into the next question. We have some solution for me right there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the next question, this is the one that we just asked here last week. It says, if you could take a lesson with any player out there, who would it be and why? And I think this was a great question, with lots of good responses out here. Sierra Hull was the first one, I think, that people started putting out in the community. So like you're Sierra Hull, Chris Thiele, David Benedict, Christian put out Afonso Machado, I think is how you say his name. He's like a Brazilian mandolin player. Joe K. Walsh, for those of you folks that don't know Joe, he teaches mandolin at Berkeley in Boston. He's an amazing mandolin player and gentleman. David Grimm.
Oh. Yeah, he's yeah, really good. But also, like, I'm hearing a lot of names in there that you're also mentioning that would maybe be possible for people to take a few lessons from. So it's not, I mean, yeah. No. Yeah, but it's cool. Really cool. I think I want to play a little bit of like my latest release here. It's Hayes already told you. It's called COVID Fever, and that also explains why you haven't heard from us in a little while. And in late January, my son came home with COVID fever. Then the whole family got it one by one. So it's been a challenging time running the podcast, the academy, the YouTube channel, and everything else. at the same. But the good thing, one thing that came out of this virus situation was this my first bluegrass fiddle tune ever. And it literally came from nowhere. It's funny how music happens sometime. And I want to let you have a listen to it here. It's simple fiddle tune structure, A part, B part, repeated twice. And I was actually like noodling around playing some that at least for me sounded like some Bill Monroe cliche licks in a way. But and I actually first time I recorded it, I was even sure, is this already a tune? But then I was thinking about it once more. No, I think it's actually something I just made up. But it at least was inspired, and it came out of some lines from Mr. Monroe himself. So here it is. There you got it, and someone thought it's a little bit of an. Someone said that they could hear some Swedish touch to it, and someone even thought it was some Irish and Celtic vibe to it. I'm not sure, but I still consider it as a bluegrass tune.
Oh man, to me, like I'm gonna just jump right in and like. I think they're just looking at the player, not the tune. In my opinion, when I listen to that tune, I hear nothing but Bill Monroe. No joke, man. Like the first time you played that tune for me, I was like, this could have been penned by the man himself, you know, like that. And here's the deal too. I think if they hear any like Celtic or like Irish or whatever influences in there, that's a heavy, huge influence on Monroe's own kind of tune writing and playing as well, you know? So I could see that connection for sure. I don't know where the Swedish thing would be. You know what I mean? I'm like, this tune's in 4. It's not a Swedish tune.
I don't hear that either. But I think probably it's the player, right?
Yeah.
It would be very interested to hear this played by a bluegrass expert. So
maybe one of these days we'll find one to play it for us.
I'm talking about you, Hayes.
Yeah. That's great, man. Yeah, I've actually been practicing this tune in my morning practice sessions. We've got some Monroe tunes coming up, you know, in the academy for release, and I was like thinking once you made this one, I was like, this is just like the perfect way to kind of like keep going with that thread for now. You know, it's because it's like an A modal tune, I guess we would call it here or whatever, you know, because it can kind of be like, do you think about it as being in like A minor when you're playing over the A chords, or do you think about it as like more of like an A5 chord where the third can shift back and forth? You know what I mean? How does, because I know that's like always a debate when you come up with these like modal tunes in the bluegrass style, you know, which type of third do you play?
Yeah. Well, I think I hear it as an A minor, probably.
That's kind of me too. Yeah.
But
that's neat.
And I think my next step for this is to also kind of work out my own break for it, sort of. And I think I want to do some double stops. I have some ideas to try.
Yeah, well, I can't wait to hear that, man.
Good. And it's also the latest release in Mandolin Secrets Academy. It's complete tutorials with tabs and sheet music there. And we also got the chord lesson for this one coming soon. And I've included more of like a new grass kind of chord voicings to it. Not the typical Monroe chop for that, but more like a Sam Bush kind of thing.
I was hoping you would say that name. That's great, man. Yeah. I immediately think, if you say Newgrass and Sam Bush, I'm immediately thinking like that A chord with your first finger on the second fret of the G and D strings, right? Like that's...
Yeah, you got it.
That's great, man.
Okay. Yeah, but it sounds good. I think, did you get a question, some theoretical question coming in that you want to address?
I was hoping we'd have a chance to talk to this. So we're kind of taking a little bit of a swerve here. We're talking about another one of Magnus's tunes here. This is one that was released. Oh, man, when did you release Jethro's Jungle? Was that 2 weeks ago or something like that?
Yeah, it's not...
Yeah, it was recently enough, But Elliot Brenner, one of our beloved community members and mandolin player extraordinaire, he asked, he said, the question is this.
Yeah.
If, for instance, a tune is in D, I automatically know that the 1, 4, and 5 chords are D, G, A.
Yeah.
The second and thirds and sixth are minors. And if he remembers, he said the 7 chord can be a 7th. So that 7th chord is going to be diminished. I'll go ahead and just address that right now. And any of these chords can be 7th chords. But then he says, fast forward to Magnus's tune, Jethro's Jungle. It is billed as being in D major. Yeah. All the primary chords, D, G, and A, are 7ths. Though one is A minor 7th, there's a stray G sharp diminished 7th. So the core question is, if a tune is billed as being in X major, where X stands for the key, D major or whatever. If a tune is billed as being in major, is that a shorthand for everything or darn near everything being a 7th? This may be a case of I'm old and can't remember stuff, so to speak. So I think I understand kind of what's going on with Elliot's question here. Jethro's Jungle is a 12-bar blues, right, Magnus?
Yeah. Exactly.
It's a which is a pretty standard form, and I think what Elliot is asking is that normally if a tune is billed as being in the key of D major, then we're going to have like, the 1, 4, and 5 are kind of like going to be, or the 1 and 4, are normally going to be like major 7ths, right? But in this tune, they're dominant 7ths, which I think can be confusing because the key of D major. If you were to make a 7th chord starting on a D note, it would be D, F sharp, A, C sharp, right? But a D 7th chord is D, F sharp, A, C natural. So do you want to jump in and explain any of that, Magnus, now that I've kind of like teed up the question here? Like why does the 12-bar blues have all these dominant 7ths versus like what would naturally be in the key of D major? I think that's really the kind of question that we're honing in on,
Yeah. Well, first of all, yes, the Jethro's Jungle, it's actually built in the jazz blues form even. So it's like evolved from the most basic jazz blues. So the most basic blues form, which is the 12-bar blues, sorry. Yeah. And so that also one thing to remember. And I'm not sure, but for in the blues form, we kind of, it's made and built from dominant 7th chords. And I'm not sure. I think you have a better answer to it, but I'm not sure why it is like that. I think for me the answer would be it just sounds very good. Sounds very cool. Sounds very bluesy.
And I'm so glad that that's what you said, actually, because I think most kind of musicologists or historians would kind of agree with you on that one, that the blues form is kind of like an arbitrary variation on like the key of D major, if we're going to use D major as our example here. So each chord has a dominant seventh on top of it, like you said, simply because it sounds good and it gives that certain character to the tune, that really kind of gritty, bluesy, soulful kind of feel. Whereas if you were to play it strictly in the key of D major and use like those major sevenths and stuff, it would have like a bit of a sweeter, kind of more gentle sound to it. So this is one of those things where like music theory, I don't think is really equipped to answer this question. You know what I mean? This is where we kind of see the reason why music theory is called music theory and not like music fact, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like an arbitrary, we're taking all those chords and just arbitrarily adding a dominant seventh to all of them. Whereas normally in the key of D, the only chord with a dominant seventh would be A, the fifth chord in that key. So that's kind of my explanation. Hopefully that kind of hones in on an answer for you out there, Elliot. But
and I think
the blues is just different. Oh yeah, that's all I was going to say.
Yeah, but the blues is different, and there is also like a melodic and harmonic relationship that is very interesting with the blues. If we're just taking the here we're playing a blues in D major even, right? It's the first chord being D7, and as Hayes pointed out, the notes for D7 that would be D, F sharp, A, and C. There are like the consonant sounds for the chords, but even like the minor third here, the F note, it's very much clashing with the original chord. Same thing with the note G, being the fourth in the chord. That is also sounding very like dissonant to right in between the F sharp and the A. It's not, but in blues music, we kind of accept this clash sort of, because it makes character to the style, and
very much so. Yeah, and this gets into a larger discussion. I've heard a lot of people talk about how, you know, music theory can only really give you like half of the equation when you're talking about these things, right? Because like it's almost like we can't explain exactly why those things sound good, but they just do. You know what I mean? Like, why does it sound good for me to be playing a chord with an F sharp in it, but when you're taking a solo, you can play an F natural over top of it, and it sounds beautiful, you know? Like it's
Yeah, and actually also for people out there that want a better understanding about the jazz blues and the music theory that we're talking about, we are actually starting another round of Fretboard Success in the beginning of April. Fretboard Success is my 6-week program dealing with music theory and mandolin patterns and shapes, basically. And in there I'm going through, we also have what is it? Like a level 2 program that is specifically working with the blues and the jazz blues.
Yeah,
because it need to be treated with some basic knowledge in place, sort of. Because as just like Elliot's pointing out here, there's some exceptions from the more traditional way of putting music theory.
Yeah, it's and for anyone out there, I'll give you a little teaser. The blues, in my opinion, requires you to look at each individual chord most of the time as its own kind of key center. That's, I think, the kind of key to, no pun intended, to like getting inside of the blues. You know, if you look at D7 as its own kind of key center and play the notes that are appropriate to that, and then when you switch to the G7, you have to kind of like reframe in your mind what the key center is and what the good notes are to play, you know.
Exactly.
And in Fretboard Success Level 2, Magnus does an amazing job of kind of steering you through the blues form in this way to kind of sound your best and immediately start playing like really good sounding lines and solos over top of it.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointing that out. When talking about this, one thing that I'm working on right now is a little bit of it's like an Adam Steffi solo that I transcribed, and it's actually in there. There's because it started like this. Something like that, and there's this shift where it goes. So it's starting in C. He's going to the E7 chord, and he's doing like. I have to play it. There's so many notes that it's clashing with the E7 chord there, but it makes total sense in the context, and it's very hard for me from a like a analytic perspective to understand how can it choose those notes and why does it sound so good. But using my ears, there's no doubt it sounds good.
Yeah.
And it's somehow connected to it doesn't like always make sense to analyze music from a music theory even, but I think that the musical theory answer we would use here, the E7 here, it's really like a dominant chord. It's actually resolving to an F chord, so there's an word for it. I don't know the English word for it, but so the resolution goes like that. And for the dominant chord, we can be really we can do things that's clashes a lot, and I think it again, That's why it ties into the blues discussion we had here.
No, I think that's great. It reminds me of a lesson that I had with Don Sternberg a couple weeks ago, where he said that jazz players have all of their fun on the dominant chords. And I think that like this is one of those instances. And just to give the listeners some context here, like we were talking about alterations and upper extensions of chords. So for those of you out there that have a little bit of music theory, we're talking about notes in our chord that are beyond the 7th. So the 9th, the 11th, the 13th, those kind of notes. And Don was saying that like on the dominant chord, you can essentially choose, like as long as your root triad or 7th chord is there, like for that E chord, E, G sharp, B, D, then the 9th, 11th, and 13th can all be altered in some way. You can do a flat 9 or a sharp 9 or a flat 13 and still make it sound cool. Which I think that example you just played is totally there. Because I heard some C notes and some F notes on top of that E chord, which are like, theoretically speaking, like no-nos. You know what I mean? Like,
even a D sharp.
Yeah, and a D sharp on an E7 chord, right? That's a major 7th on top of a dominant 7. So like that's quote wrong, right? Like no way. It sounds awesome.
But in the hands of Adam Steffi, it makes perfect sense. And
exactly.
Cool. I think it's finding these things, playing around with that. That's what makes this art form so interesting, and it keeps us going.
Exactly. Yeah. Can't always explain all of it, right?
No. Okay, folks. Thank you for showing up for the live stream, and thanks to everyone listening to the podcast episode. For this one, well, I think that's it for today. If there's anything you wanna, you can always reach us by sending an email. It's either hayes@mandolinsecrets.com or magnus@mandolinsecrets.com. We'll be happy to hear from you if there's something you wanna share with us.
Definitely, and we'd love to have some like pre-submitted questions or anything like that. So if there's anything that's kind of on your mind, please email us, and we would be happy to include it in an episode. Also, we're getting back into a regular swing here with the show, so you'll probably see us here in a couple weeks. But just to be sure, go ahead and check out mandolinsecrets.com/live for more information on how to keep up with the show. You can sign up for our email reminders there, so you'll get like a quick reminder whenever we're about to go live and all that stuff, and you can join us. And if you're preferring to listen to us on your favorite podcast platform, thank you for doing so. And we're on all the major ones, so check us out on Spotify, Apple, Deezer, or you can just go to mandolinsecrets.com/podcast and listen there. There's tons of options.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Hayes, and thanks to everyone listening. And until next time, I'm saying this to myself, I'm saying it to you. Be a music maker.